Well, hello and good Friday evening, everyone. How are you? Trust you're having a great Friday night. Thank you for tuning in and hope the next hour will at least keep you entertained. Looks like there's a lot of Halloween parties taking place. And isn't it interesting how we like to dress up in costume? I mean, why is that? Be curious to see how far that tradition goes back. Um, I don't know, maybe later on or someone's got ideas on that. Be curious to see because it is interesting. We teach our children at a very young age that it's fun to dress up, it's fun to be scared. But the cool thing is that you get to get sweets. Ain't a bad deal. And then how many of us growing up in our, let's say, adolescent years, teenage years, um, TP'd more than one house and did a number of pranks that you look back and today you would be arrested as a terrorist. True story. I'll tell you. I grew up in Houston, specifically the Montrose area. 1971 um, was already on my own, and on Main Street, going down by the zoo and Miller's Park. And those of you who are listening from Houston or who lived in Houston may know that area. Well, we were one of those group of young adolescents, teenagers, and we actually closed down the whole 4-lane road. It was crazy because we dumped a big old box, 5-pound box of Tide into the fountain. And we did not know seriously that that much soap powder would produce that many bubbles. I mean, um, we were standing afar watching it, and at first it was kind of cool when it was just like really bubbling out of the fountain. But about 5 minutes into that, it was like it got supercharged and it just was going everywhere and started running into the street. Cars were having to put on their windshield wipers because this was at night, around midnight. And yeah, it was quite the experience. There's another time I did something with another guy that was just really bad, but that's for another story. So, how is everyone? What kind of week did you have? Good, bad, interesting, anything of self discovery? You know, as we go through each week, I find it interesting that how time has literally flown. I mean, November. We're at November. I'm trying to think where last winter went. And I'm looking back and it's like the days are a blur. It is getting colder here. But I was thinking today, as looking at just some of the headline in the news, and we're going to talk about a couple of stories, was that how in the world of politics, how the pendulum seems to just be swinging with intensity back and forth. It's like you just don't know what's going to be coming out next. I apologize about the throat. A little something going around up here. So, and sometimes it's quite interesting. I wouldn't say amusing. I mean, I don't think wishing on your opponent bad karma is healthy for anyone. And as much as we like to be of human nature, which it is our nature, we always want to see, we would never call it vengeance. We'd like to see justice where the scales are balanced. But I once heard it said that the ultimate power is measured by the amount of mercy. And I think I can live through life with that. Seems kind of balanced, doesn't it? I mean, listen, whatever awaits us on the other side. By the way, on Tuesday night, Barbara DeLong will be back, and she's going to talk about her experiences as a medium talking with people on the other side. So I think that's going to be an interesting show. Tune in Tuesday night at 7 o'clock Mountain Time. And how we find so many things in life as we go that, when you're wronged, you're just like, hey, man, that really sucks. I think sucks is a acceptable term. And, you just at times would just like to just say, you know, but you can't do it. You really can't. I mean, because let's say you got the justice, right? I don't know. Seeing your enemy suffer, I just, nah, that doesn't get anywhere. It leads us right back where we are. And where we are right now sucks, just to say. That's tonight's commentary. But there's a lot of other things that do warrant our attention. I have a story, and allow me to pull it up. Okay, bear with me. Here we go. I think everybody can see that, right? All right. I'm assuming you can. So I found this very interesting. Department of Defense plans solar storm based national blackout drill during the Antifada protest in November. Now, according to this, the National Association of Amateur Radio, elements of the U.S. Department of Defense will simulate a communication interoperability training exercise across the United States on November 4th through 6th. The announcement, released on October 24th, has not been widely distributed to media because the drill is simulating a total grid collapse and could spark public fear. I continue to read on. This exercise will begin with a national massive coronal mass ejection event, which will impact the national power grid as well as all forms of traditional communications, including landline telephone, cell phone, satellite, and internet connectivity. So I looked back on this, and I'll leave, well, everyone, you can see the link here. I can actually do that. um, but here's the deal. This is getting interesting. So right before, right after the eclipse, from August 22nd to 24th, I believe, there was another nationwide drill, this one conducted under the auspiciousness of DHS, of simulating, again, a disruption to the power grid. That exercise, I believe, was called Operation Dark Skies, Darkened Skies, something like that. Now we read this story of what the Department of Defense, and interesting that they happen to be specifically focused in here on the simulation of a CME hitting the Earth. That's interesting. Now, I think being prepared is absolutely the smart thing to do. Was a Boy Scout, um, didn't quite make it to Eagle, but nevertheless, you know, making it all the way up to Star Scout. So, it's all right. But it teaches you being prepared is good. But for a complete blackout of the power grid, think about that. So, what would that do to your life? Here you are, you know, I was thinking about this morning. It's getting darker now. Here in Colorado, the sun isn't coming up until almost 7:20 in the morning. It's starting to set at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I believe it is the 5th, I think, so when the clocks go back. And so it's getting darker longer. And the thought did occur to me that when I flip the switch on, and actually we all expect the light to go on. Come on, you do too. All of us do. We expect the refrigerator to stay cold. We expect that the Wi-Fi is on, and we expect that the TV is going, and we have internet access. I mean, that's how you and I are communicating. But if that was to go down, what kind of interruption? We have seen what happens when a natural disaster, such as a weather event, in this case a hurricane, what it's done to the Caribbean. And we're going to actually look at a story on that, because I did not realize the impact. We see the pictures, and yours and my reality is based upon the imprint our mind picks up from the electrical impulses that our brain is generating along the synaptic pathways. And the incredible thing is, it isn't known how it happens, but the mind literally takes those impulses and then translates it into real-time imagery. It's amazing. So we see the pictures on television, and then that kind of forms our reality. And we see it, we go, wow, we're impacted by it, and then we move on. Well, let me show you a story about a man named Brady. Yeah. Here we go. Get back to where we were. So check this out, folks. This is the Telegraph. This is the Caribbean. Remember the stories about the how the water was being pulled out of I believe it was primarily the east and north primarily facing um, islands, and that how it just like sucked the water out 20 feet, 25 feet. Well, it seems that it's a mess. It's They say it goes for miles. And it's bad enough that we've got that permanent bio sphere right now in the Pacific, that of all the plastic, it doesn't break down. It never goes away. So here we have that now hitting in the Caribbean, which, I mean, it's crazy. But getting back to what I was really making the point about electricity, there not only is it the uh, the country of Puerto Rico, but many of those Caribbean nations there wiped out as far as the power grid is concerned. And I saw a story just the other day of how these independent reporter went in and was talking to the people that were really back away from the urban areas. And it's exactly what has been written about. It is taking place exactly as it has been said, what happens to society. So we see this on a micro scale, right? And excuse me, that they literally had to go back to the Stone Age. And what made the problem particularly bad in this case was that this hurricane that went through was so powerful that a lot of the trees were blown away as well. They said in some of the rural areas where there was typically more jungle, um, more heavily wooded, wouldn't say forested, but close to that, gone. I mean, the winds were so powerful. So imagine no electricity, limited amount of combustible fuel in order for you to cook with. You'd have to have something in order to sterilize the water, uh, and particularly in that environment. And I think no matter uh, where you would be at. So it goes to show you that if the Department of Defense is preparing for, in this case, a simulated coronal mass ejection event, makes you wonder. So how prepared are you? That's the question. Do you store food? Do you keep a alternative light source supply? I mean, if the lights went out, you know, how long do you think you could really go? Good question for all of us. Now, how many of you have been watching the stock market? If you have a 401k at work or some other um, instrument that you're putting savings into and it's into mutual funds or whatever, everyone's doing really good. I mean, when you look at this year, when you get your 401k statements, you're going to be pleasantly surprised. There is the spillover effect. It's just, I see though two different sides to this. In one aspect, it does seem like we're finally getting this machine back up. It was on life support for so long through what I called basically low jacking the patient. And that is just keeping them doped up, not really helping them, but just keeping them alive. Well, that's what the economy has been, particularly the last 7 years. It was really, really been tough. So now we're starting to see growth. We're starting to see the fact that in one aspects, and I think it's still regional, but I think it's beginning to spread out. And when I say by that, if you're into, well, for instance, here in Denver, Denver has the hottest housing market that's out there, and it's readily notable. But we're seeing it now beginning to pick up into the Midwest, and that's always a good indicator when you see it, particularly in the still remaining manufacturing sector. And hopefully the United States will get back to that. We need manufacturing. Um, so where am I going with this? Okay, I have a story that I want us to take a look at. So I found this story interesting. Are we seeing the Gilded Age? How many of you know what the Gilded Age was? Well, it was about the 20s, the 1920s, nearly almost 100 years, about 90 years ago. That was a time where the stock market was on fire. Um, Anomalies in the market. It was where we were seeing artificial policies being injected into the market that had never been seen before. And what those events tend to do is that they tend to artificially inflate particular market sectors. There's a real winners and losers mentality. And if you go back and look at the history, you can particularly look at New York City. That was the time that the skyscrapers went up everywhere in Manhattan. And it was a time of unprecedented wealth. Think the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, you could just go on and on. Think the Titanic, those who perished on that. There's an interesting conspiracy behind that. But in any case, here's the thing. I just read in the Wall Street Journal today that Asia now has more billionaires than the US. So you're seeing China with unprecedented wealth. And we're really got the Charles Dickens story unfolding for all of us here. This is truly the tale of two cities. And in one aspect, we have a segment of society that is really prospering from this unprecedented growth. But at the same time of this unprecedented wealth that's being generated, we see more and more dichotomy between the haves and the haves not. So where am I going with this story? Well, uh, here's the deal. I read today, and you can check this out yourself. Amazon just got approved to become a pharmacy. Yeah. Now, 10 years ago, Walmart was the absolute dominant player. It was the king of the hill. And no one could have imagined that what started out is simply back in the days when I was very active in Austin, Texas, and developing e-commerce. I still look back on it back in the mid to late 90s. We were actually pioneering what e-commerce is today. And, you know, we never thought eBay, Amazon. So today, that internet company is now the dominant world player. Excuse me. So think about this. They're going to become a pharmacy. So a bank next. Excuse me. Apologize for that. But this is a dynamic that is changing. And as this new paradigm becomes ever expanding out, listen, how many of you have Alexa in your house? How many of you have the Google? We all have Siri, unless you turn it off, but now you can actually get Siri into your house. What we have done, and this becomes a problem for society eventually, is that now we have allowed an elite few who dominate the commerce. And if you don't think Google doesn't dominate commerce, or Amazon, or eBay, or any number of other e-commerce websites, well, you know as well as I do. That's exactly what they're doing. And now you've got individuals like Jeff Bezos. And listen, the guy went out there when no one else did. And so he's definitely reaping the rewards of that. And this is where we now have individuals, and mark my words on this, in the next 4 years, you're going to see more and more of these new titans of commerce getting into the political arena. And they'll bring a completely different paradigm with them. And the question I'm trying to bring out in all of our minds, do we really want to see these companies begin to dominate everything because of the wealth that they have? I don't know. If it brings down prices, I guess people will champion that cause. And anyone who must take some of these drugs now, if you see it advertised on television, it's expensive. And, you know, it's true that a lot of people literally can't afford to take the medicine, which I think is sometimes, if we go back to nature, may not. So, is this good for us or not? The new Gilded Age. My concern is, are we seeing a pattern being set up? Now, I could get into the fact that the Fed chairman, um, there's a new one about to be appointed, which always brings another change. All right. How about the JFK files? What a dud. You know what that reminded me of? I was sitting here getting ready for tonight's show and I was thinking about this. And I kept thinking, this reminded me of Geraldo, Geraldo Rivera and um, Al Capone's vault. I mean, remember ABC gave like this live special? Now, if some of you who weren't born back then or can't remember, literally that's what they did. Here is Geraldo Rivera out there, and now they have found Al Capone's vault. And I mean, they got the jackhammers going. A lot of y'all that remember that. And when they finally break through, you know what they found? Nothing. And that's exactly what we got here was nothing. Apparently the really salacious stuff or the stuff that was really going to help pull, prove is, was the grassy knoll, um, the true place. They'll never, never tell us. Never. All right, got another story. I'll be curious to see how this goes into the chat room. So check this one out. This is in the Wall Street Journal. The Catholic Hospital Group grants euthanasia to mentally ill. Now, last night, the Turner Classic Movie Channel ran a series of some of the great sci-fi movies, and one of those movies was Charlton Heston's Soylent Green. And when I read this, I'm curious to see how those of you in the chat room right now feel about this. Is this a sign of mercy to be able to grant a person the option of dying on their own terms? Is that a sign of a society ascending or descending? What do you think? I don't know. Worldwide, dementia is becoming it's becoming the leading disease affecting the elderly. But here's something else. It's going down in age. I read a report that they're seeing early signs of dementia in late 40s. Think about that. Late 40s. Now, I just did a story. I don't know how many of you watched it on Are We Already Contaminated, Infected? It was about smart dust. We've all have read, looked into the stories of chemtrailing. I mean, we all know it happens. I mean, I live up here nearly at 6,000 feet of elevation. And Denver is, we got traffic that never stops. I mean, Denver's a major hub here. By the way, we do have the longest North American runway, even longer than the military. It's over 16,000 feet. But I digress. We see the planes all the time, and you know the difference between a contrail. Those are very readily seen. And a lot of times we see the jet traffic go over that's emitting nothing. And then there's those others that you can see it. It's just like painting a piece of chalk. So we're seeing greater signs of dementia. We're seeing this also in the form of Alzheimer's. So to euthanize the mentally ill, now the question I think about is that, is it mercy to the person? I think about Glenn Campbell. And how many of you remember Glenn Campbell? Um, I am a lineman for the county. Anyway, the point is this. He recently passed on, but he realized when he got the final diagnosis that the Alzheimer's the onset of it had become so aggressive that they told him it could be within a matter of days and you're not going to remember anyone. So if you get a chance, go and listen to that last song that he wrote. He wrote it to his wife. And I believe the title of the song is that um, I Won't Remember Loving You. And that's what it was. He was giving his last song to his wife saying, I know it's coming. I'm not going to remember you and I'm not going to remember loving you. So are we doing a person a favor, showing them great mercy to be able to end their life? Now, I think we can all agree on, you know, those that are dying of a terminal disease. So is it any different? And I know this is a heavy subject, but hey, sometimes that's what life is. It We all want to talk about elevating the collective consciousness. Well, it's these type of subjects that you have to begin to give serious conversation to them. And in a forum like this, where we're fortunate, where we can talk about this, because and indeed, I think it reflects a society. And I think it reflects the conscious level of that society. And I don't know. I look at this, I mean, if it's not that person anymore, and that brings up another question. If a person through an illness of the brain loses their personality, is the soul still occupying that space? Now, we know the body is still alive, but they can keep a person's body alive that is brain dead. In fact, that's how they do it for a lot of time of body harvesting of parts. So the question I think about, well, if the person is no longer there, where the mind is able to imprint what the brain is sending, is the mind no longer present? I did that video today, and high five for every one of you that watched that. And some of the most enlightened comments. I mean, you cats are, like I said, I pity the fool who comes in here and thinks that they can speak that stuff to us. I mean, and I have friends who comment all the time that says, that's a smart bunch in there. And I said, yeah, it really is. It is a smart bunch. And uh, so it's that question, mind. What is our minds? I'm starting to see this. I really am. You know, I think about this a lot, and this is how I see it. This what plays out in my mind. And I'll use the metaphor as following. Seinfeld. How many of you remember Seinfeld? And it was the number one show. And in that, there's an episode where Kramer um, meets, oh, I'm trying to think. I'll think of the singer. And Kramer's gone to the dentist. And anyway, there's a guy that's in the gym with George, and his name is Jimmy. And Jimmy always speaks of himself in the third person, right? So, and it's funny because when the guy's talking, he's always saying, "Well, Jimmy is hungry." It's just- what I'm trying to get to here is in my mind now, it's as if I'm sitting back watching this unfold. Even now, I sit, well, I don't know if sitting is in the mind, I'm an observer, is the best way to put it. I'm observing events and it's registering with me. I'm aware more than I ever have been that there really is an inner me. And you really can have a conversation with yourself in a number of different tenses. I mean, it could be past tense, present tense. I think that whether you're a worrier or you're a person who projects visual uh, events that you want to happen, that's what worry is. And really, it's the difference between faith and worry. But more and more, I truly am aware. In that program I did today, the point I was trying to get to is that mind is more dominant than I think I've ever been aware of. And, you know, the day is coming where we all are going to die. And that's the inevitability of the road we're on. At least, let me put it in the context, the death of the body. You know, they may be able to find that gene and turn it on, and all of a sudden, within 6 months, where you can see a person who's aged dramatically. My wife and I know of an individual that's happened to. And a lot of times that happens, particularly when people have really um, had a battle of fighting a health issue. And you can see it just drains the life source. That's what cancer does, just drains the energy from us. But they say they've discovered how to reverse that gene. And now I haven't seen any evidence yet, but that's what they're saying, that in the next 5 years, you'll be able to see the same type effect reversed. Imagine that. I mean, that has implications for everyone. But getting back to this whole point. So Are we more merciful in making that decision? I mean, I think about it. How many of you have wills or, have provisions for if something should happen? That they can make those life decisions for you. I mean, there's some people who've chosen not to be resuscitated, and there's those who do. As I'm talking, I'm thinking that's why people, put themselves in cryogenic stasis. They really hope that eventually the technology will come where that can be reversed. I think, unfortunately, um, they are never going to come back. Uh, I'm convinced that if you ever once you leave, right? Once mind and spirit, soul leave this matter, this body, I don't know if you'd want to come back. I mean, that's the whole thing I think about Ghost. I mean, there's Halloween parties being held tonight, and there'll be more tomorrow night. Um, but I don't know. Maybe there's just those people who don't want to leave. Maybe there's those who have passed on that were just so thoroughly pissed off that, you know, no matter what they saw on the other side, um, they ain't leaving. I don't know. I think a vast majority must find it to be enough that they do go. They do continue on. I choose to think that away. What about yourself? So it gets right back down to the story again. Is this the right thing to do? And I guess, I'd almost say, I think it is. I really do. If that person is no longer there, I recall the last days of Ronald Reagan, great president. His last couple of years, he should not have stayed in office, but he was a great president, great mind, great mind. And it succumbed to Alzheimer's. And they said there at the end, he didn't recognize anyone. To me, I think that says the former occupant is out, not coming back. So, anyway, yeah, I know it's a heavy subject, but that's what happens. So, how many of you saw the story I did on what the Russians launched? I want to take a look at that. And I actually put together. Hold on one second. There you go. I know you can see that. So this was last night um, in Russia. I did a whole little 10-minute video on it. And that's just impressive signature, isn't it? And I was talking on email, a lot of great comments on this, by the way. Someone said, well, maybe it was a hydrogen engine. And I said, huh, okay. Uh, Another discussion I had was maybe someone's testing an H3 engine, helium-3. And I said, well, that's a good idea too. So anyway, the Russians, by the way, have been, in fact, here, let me get there. There you go. So they've been doing a lot of testing. By the way, the US has been aggressively testing as well. Um, this is one of those weird ones that people are saying is a UFO. I don't know. They said the reason of that is that it's kind of where the missile or the object was coming from. And I'm just going, well, I don't know where the launch was. This was last year up in, I believe it was Sweden. That's, someone said, well, what about a beam? And you know, I like that. I like that idea. I mean, are we looking at a new propulsion system? Are we looking at a new, how shall I say, approach to light? Are we looking at different approaches to other dimensions? This was, again, over Russia. The missile is said to be up here. Again, impressive heat signature. I mean, holy cow. Now this was a missile test again. And you can see that this one here kind of makes sense. I mean, I don't know. I always thought the trajectory of a missile was a little more stable than that, but could be also hitting the wind currents up there. It's hard to say. I don't know. A lot of conspiracies, you know. Listen, the way I look at it, when I started looking into this, we don't know what the Russians are doing. Our news is so censored. If you watch RT Times, they have a YouTube channel. Actually, you can get some pretty good news from there. But again, it's filtered, but it gives you at least a perspective on another side, right? But you know, the Russians are really into technology, as the Chinese are, as the Japanese are. I did not realize this, but the Japanese are really early pioneers in H3 engines. They've got a whole company. There it is right here. I thought I'd just show you on this. So everyone should see this story. This is the object that NASA, the European Space Agency, is talking about, is that it came out of nowhere and making its, saying hello to our solar system and heading back out. So, did you know that our galaxy is colliding right now with the Sagittarius Dwarf Galaxy? By the way, it appears the Milky Way is a rather how should we say, a carnivorous galaxy. This isn't the first one this galaxy has assimilated. Now, I have a theory that as we continue to hit the core of the Sagittarius Dwarf Galaxy, that we're going to see more and more of these anomalies coming into our solar system. 2008, the Earth took a direct hit with a gamma ray. Now, I was always taught that gamma rays are, you don't want to be in the path of them. Well, they're saying because this one was 7 billion light years away, that the energy had dissipated enough that it didn't cause any harm on the Earth. I don't know about that. I guess we're still here, right? So check this out. This is what's happening. We already ate this one, Canis Major Dwarf. Our galaxy is really a cannibalistic monster out there. So the Sagittarius is 10,000 times smaller in mass than the Milky Way. So it's getting stretched out, torn apart, and gobbled up by us. Now, when you begin to think about this is the Milky Way right here. This is us. I think we can expect to see more and more objects coming in. I think it's just where it's going. So there you go. Well, I hope you found, let me go over here and I want to see what's going on in the chat room, folks. Give me 1 second. There we are. Wow. Hello, everyone. Wow, 94 if you have. Come on, you folks. You got something else better to do? No, thank you and all for coming. I mean, isn't this odd? Yes, that is. I'm reading the comments now. Yeah. That's an interesting thought that we are in the Sagittarius galaxy. I hadn't thought about that. That's a pretty cool thought. I hadn't. Way to go, Milky Way Weekly. And one of the things, maybe you all can comment in on this as well, is that I found. Remember, about 25 years ago, 30 years, we were supposed to have been on what was it, the third rung of this thing, right? In the spiral. Now someone, and I saw this, puts us more like much more closer to the center. Have you seen that as well? Do I think the kilonova wave will affect us in any way? Well, I'll tell you how I look at this. I think we're learning more about waves. Um, it's a new area of science, and I happen to think that as we get more knowledge, that we're going to find out. I think we've been impacted by a lot of galactic waves in various forms. And time distortion, I absolutely believe in that. Einstein proved that. Hubble showed that if gravity can, in fact, be fluxed, then so is time. So if time can have a flux to it, then gravity is merely reflective of time as well. So I absolutely do believe that's the case. And by the way, talking about gravity, when I think about gravity as well, when you look at the effects of gravity and you begin to look at a mass of like the Earth, we're spinning at what, 1,050 miles per hour, right? So gravity cannot stay cohesive as you get closer to the center of what we call the mass of the Earth. So I often think that gravity would then begin to have a distortion of being lesser. I wonder if time is affected as the same way. Well, everyone, this has been fun. I hope you've enjoyed it. This has been something I've enjoyed. Looking at some of the comments here. Well, anyway, let me get back to over here. So now I can see myself talking in real time. It's like, I always like that. It's, you go to YouTube and you're looking at Zoom and and then I start talking like this. Sorry. I always liked the original Saturday Night Live. And I'm trying to think who it was. It wasn't Eddie Murphy. Oh, I'll think of it here in a second. But anyway, folks, well, you have yourself a great Friday night. I do appreciate every one of you. Thank you. Let me know what you think of in the comments that I've seen. Sounds like we're at least getting the enlightened group of that as well. Yeah, I do. I have a timer over there, so we don't talk too much. All right. We will talk again. Might do a program tomorrow night. I don't know, but we'll definitely come Tuesday night. I'm very curious to see what Barbara's. I find that the stories fascinating. I think I find them fascinating as the hope that, it's like, all right, yeah, I could get into that. Wednesday night over on Jeff's channel, Jeff Doherty, Christian Whistleblower. We do our Wednesday night program. And join us Sunday mornings. We launch at 9 a.m. East Coast time. Join us over on Jeff's channel for not your normal Sunday morning program. It's really beginning to grow. It's a fun time. I think I read in one of the comments, someone said, well, hell, if church was like this, I'd attend all the time. So we'll keep you definitely mind going on that one. All right, folks, appreciate you. We will talk real soon. All right, bye-bye.